Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I'm Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. So today I wanted to share a little personal update and use this also as an opportunity to share some lessons that I think are really valuable and can be very important to learn as we go through our own healing journeys. And these are things that I talk about with clients all of the time. And there can often be a lot of frustration and just a lot of emotions that come up around a lot of these things. And so I wanted to use this time to just share a little bit of a personal update and be able to share some of the lessons that I've learned and have to continue to incorporate and practice myself that are also highly valuable as we're going through our own healing journeys, especially if you have a lot of chronic illness issues going on here. So I also want to say before I just dive into this, I know we've done re-releases the past couple of weeks, and largely this has been because of some of the stuff that I've been experiencing. I thank you for your patience. That is not where I like to be. I like recording new content, being able to share just different things. I'm working on having some guests on that I think could be really valuable and share some just information that maybe I'm not the best person to talk about. And I really appreciate it. Just bearing with us here as I'm going through some stuff. And the other thing I'm going to say is I'm not out of all of this. I'm working through this still right now. So full disclosure, I'm still a little bit in the middle of this. It's potentially not as bad as it was over the last couple of weeks, and I'm still not 100% where I'd like to be. So a few weeks ago, there's also a series of things that are also going on here. So a few weeks ago, maybe even a little over a month ago, I started to notice I was having some heat intolerance issues where I'd go outside, my body would get hot, and I was noticing that I wasn't sweating very much or very easily. And that's not great. That is not a good place. And that is a place where I used to be like a very long time ago. But even before I started on all of my health and healing journey, I had a lot of issues sweating. And we see a lot of clients that come into that too, where, you know, they go into a hot yoga class or they go out in the heat and they barely sweat, especially compared to maybe other people around them, other people in a class or things like that. And they're just not sweating a whole lot. So, and that is also, by the way, just like not good as a sign that your liver is struggling to push things out. So I started increasing some of my liver supporting activities and incorporating some supplementation to help support that. I also recognize here that in case you don't remember, in case maybe haven't heard this, the last 2 years have been, or year and a half really, have been incredibly stressful in my life. And my body has been amazing and handled it super well. And potentially it is all just really culminating at this moment. And that really may be where my body is at this time. So going through a divorce last year, moving, like selling a house, like leaving my whole life, deciding to travel, just me and my car, getting into a new relationship. That relationship got very serious very quickly. And then we decided to travel. And then we decided to get an RV and live an RV kind of life. And we had travel plans and getting down to Arizona here. And then my partner started having health struggles, and then he got diagnosed with cancer, and then going through cancer treatment, and all of these things. It's just been a lot. It's just been a lot going on consistently for about a year and a half. And there was a lot of things that I had to work through last year, just from a healing perspective in a relationship, Sleep, I had a lot of sleep trauma that I had to work through, and that was new. And I've worked through all of that and come through all of this very beautifully, in my opinion. And potentially at this point, my body is just really stressed, and it's really just come to a head. And that may be uh, the point of all of this. And so this is to say that lesson number one, stress can have a bigger impact than we really believe. And, I consistently for the last probably 10, 11 months, I'm recording this in August. So yeah, 10, 11 months, my sleep has been pretty darn good. And especially the last probably 4 or 5 months, once my partner started going through treatment, and he was waking up in the middle of the night every night with like pretty significant night sweats. That was the biggest, our biggest sign that something more serious was going on, were his very significant night sweats, in which case, he didn't sleep through the night for several months. And that obviously impacted my sleep as well. So, and not that there's any fault or blame in that. It's just, of course, if your partner is not sleeping super well very consistently, of course that's going to have an impact on you. But I'd say for the last, yeah, 4 or 5 months, I mean, since he's really like, especially after the second round of treatment, that those night sweats really start to dissipate. And maybe he'd have like a couple nights before his next round of treatment. But I mean, my sleep, I would say right now, my sleep has never been better. I've been on adrenal cocktails very consistently. I have a very consistent mindfulness routine, connection routine to my body, to myself, and that has been great. I don't experience a lot of what I would consider my previous signs of stress. Stress for me used to show up really as cortisol issues, anxiety, the mind racing, not being hungry in the morning, getting tired and wired, having a lot of trouble falling asleep, waking up at 3 a.m., having trouble going back to sleep. All of those really classic cortisol signs, that's how stress used to show up in my body. And I think one of the challenges for me, and once again, I do see this with clients pretty often too, is that is not how my body shows stress anymore. I do not have any of those things even when stress is high. I mean, I might feel some anxiety, but it does not feel the same. It does not show up the same. It presents very, very differently, which is great. And also presents a challenge in and of itself of, okay, now that I'm not in that place, now that my nervous system is pretty regulated, what does stress feel like to me? How does stress show up in my body? And I think the biggest sign for me over the last handful of months, and I have shared this before, is some hormonal shifts that I've been feeling, especially in the second half of my cycle, where I can feel after I ovulate that progesterone kind of dip, and I can feel like mood, so sleep a little bit, but although sleep still is pretty darn good, even when my progesterone it does drop. So, yeah, and just like some different physical kind of symptoms that I've experienced that are pretty classic signs of low progesterone. And it hasn't been crazy, hasn't been super intense. I'm going to share a little bit more about one of those pieces that came up for me last month that I did do a little experimentation on myself. And this is also a lesson as to why I don't why I don't experiment with clients without proper testing, especially when it comes to hormones. But that has been like the sign for me that I have been stressed. And that's about it. And so when some of the things that I started experiencing started to come on, especially like this heat intolerance thing, very unusual. I've never really experienced that. I will also say I've never been in Arizona for the summer where it's at least where we are right now, it's about 105 pretty much every day, give or take 5 degrees. It very rarely dips below 100 degrees for the highs, and it very rarely dips below 70 as the low. And I'll say more consistently, we're seeing 75 to 80 as the low. Also recognize I'm in a new living space so that it is a little bit more prone to weather exposure. And we have AC unit. We have two AC units in here. They work phenomenal. I typically don't feel very warm when we're in here. There might be about an hour a day where I'm like, I can feel a little bit warm. But it's not like I'm not sweating. I'm not like hot. I just like, yeah, I can tell it's the middle of the day and it's a little warm. I'd say the other sign that I've experienced with question mark stress, and there's a lot of factors that go into this too, is higher levels of histamine and some histamine related issues. And I will recognize if you're watching this, you might be able to see little Cusco, the little kitty cat here. He is sleeping in his box right now. He's very precious, very sweet. He is facing the camera, and you can, if you watch this, you can see him sleeping in the box very close to me right now. He doesn't like when I talk about him. His eyes just opened a little bit. But I have a history of being allergic to cats. And, allergies, question mark who you talk to. Are allergies true? Are they just an immune system response? There are a lot of things that I think we can do to prevent, change, modulate true allergies. And that for me really got exacerbated in the spring here. And yeah, just like different allergens, I ended up finding some homeopathic things that were very supportive for me that really helped. But I never really went away after allergy season until pretty recently. And I'm going to share some thoughts on that here too. But that would be like the other sign that I really started to experience around the histamine piece here. I'll also share that I know histamine and mold are highly related. I talk about that quite regularly. We keep a very close eye out for mold in this place. And I know RVs can get leaks and everything like that. I will say, even with my partner's diagnosis and the treatment and everything, we are very on top of maintenance when it comes to our house. And I know our house is on wheels, and I know there are some limitations here, but we check water leaks, we check for soft flooring, we check for all kinds of different things to make sure that is not a thing. I do think the cat fur and just the cat dandruff has played a big role, because I would notice, if I was playing with him and I got some scratches that would make things worse. I'm in love with the cat, by the way. So, I hold him, I pick him up, I kiss him, I put my face in his face, and that's a real thing. Hormones can also play a role in this too, wherein I have noticed over the past several months, and I can even feel it just a little bit today. I'm getting ready to start my period, so my estrogen is on the rise here, that I do feel just a tiny, I don't even feel stuffy, but I just feel like tingly in my nose. And if you're watching this, you can see I've touched my nose a couple of times, and it's just like, oh, I just feel a little tingle in there. I don't necessarily feel congested, but I do feel just like a little tingle here. And I can tell you that's probably hormone related, just in where I am with my cycle. So that's another thing here. So those have been my signs of stress, and they have not been super obvious. They have not been like in my face. They have been pretty subtle, in my opinion. I will say last month hormones got a little wild, and I did do some work here for this. But this newer heat intolerance was an unusual thing that came up for me. And when I started back in the sauna, and I had mentioned that after my partner got his diagnosis, I had been doing the sauna very consistently, but I started getting reactions. I started feeling very lethargic after doing the sauna. There's also a little bit of ego on my part with that, where I was still trying to go for 45 to 55 minutes at full temperature, and looking to get a full, like really intense full body sweat, and that was probably just too much. And so I stopped and I switched to some other things that are a little bit less intensive. I've been on advanced TEDCA from Cellcore at half dose. I've been on a binder, primarily via Redchem, also from Cellcore at half dose, for the entirety of his treatment, in an attempt to make sure that I am supporting my body, along with castor oil packs, typically 2 or 3 times a week for an hour up to 3 or 4 hours, kind of depending on the day and just what I had space for, and trying not to put too much pressure on myself. So that has all been things that I've been doing to support my body, along with sleep and stress management. I've been doing adrenal cocktails and supporting my digestion. And my digestion is another thing that typically in the past that would get a little wonky when I would get stressed. And I'll tell you, it is so rare that I don't have like a super great regular bowel movement at least once a day, that I feel any sort of gas, bloating, acid reflux type issues. I mean, it's just so rare, and that has not presented itself essentially at all. So that's like another thing that's been a little bit odd for me, that, looking for signs of stress, that has not been the case. So, and I share all this to acknowledge that, as we go through our healing journey, we have to continuously learn to connect, to tune into our bodies, because these things will shift, these things will change as we continue to heal. And I consider that a good thing, where our nervous systems are regulating stress inside and outside of the body. It's just getting better and better. So things can shift, things can change, things can present differently, and our bodies can ask for support in different ways. And if we're not super in tune and super listening, at some point, our bodies are going to start to scream. And once again, that scream may present differently than it has in the past. And that's kind of where I've been over the last couple of weeks, where my body has started to scream a little bit more. And I have been listening, and it's been a little bit challenging because there are a lot of things going on. Personally, we're getting ready to wrap up treatment. He's got two, as of the recording of this episode, two more treatments. I am going to talk about his last treatment because there's this very specific event that happened there. That was a big trigger for me. And also recognizing we have to go back next Monday for treatment. So, these things have been, I feel like they've been pretty subtle for my body up until, once again, like the last few weeks here. And so it was like this heat intolerance, and then like histamine issues starting to get worse and worse. And I was noticing and I did have a head cold 2 weeks ago, which didn't help anything. And I do really think it was a head cold or sinus infection, because I had, my glands got swollen, and I was getting like a really, really stuffy and sinus pressure, sinus headaches. It was very isolated to right in my head. I didn't have any throat stuff outside of just like my glands being a little bit swollen. And it very much felt like a head cold. And my partner then ended up getting that, which didn't help going into treatment here either. So that is all a thing. So, which is also not uncommon. When our bodies are struggling, we are more susceptible to get sick. And we do not go out a whole lot right now. I typically will run to the grocery store once a week. I try and go out for a walk a couple times a day. It's been a little hit or miss here recently, but we don't go out a ton. So it's like the interaction with other people. It's like, where would we have gotten sick? It certainly could have been at the hospital, because when we do go for those days, we are there for anywhere between 8 to 12 hours. And we do interact with quite a handful of people. Plus, we're in a hospital setting. We're not in the ER or anything, but we are in a very specific, primarily in the cancer floor of the Mayo Clinic. But those are also very early days. They're very long days. They are stressful. My partner feels the effects pretty immediately going into, as soon as they start, like he starts not to feel good. He's usually sleeping on the ride home, all that kind of stuff. So all of that is for sure stressful and plays a role in all of this. So I got this head cold a few weeks ago. Actually, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now. So I got this head cold. And then I didn't feel like 100% recovered. I had a couple days where I was like, okay, I'm coming out of this. And then coming out of that, on our previous treatment day, I got incredibly sick on the day of treatment. We got to the clinic. I felt totally fine. I had eaten breakfast. Like, I had slept decent that night, maybe not quite enough as I would have liked. We are typically up anywhere between like 4:30 and 5:30, which is definitely not where I am normally. I'm typically like up between 7 and 8 kind of person, where I typically get up naturally. My body naturally gets up, occasionally 6:30 to 8, depending on what time I went to bed and how restful my sleep was, where I am in my cycle. That all plays a role here. But I got incredibly sick. I mean, sick to my stomach, kind of sick. So, the thought was food poisoning. The thought was, we did rule out pregnancy, just by the way, because I know people are going to ask. It was brought up to me a couple of times when I shared some of the things that I was experiencing. Yes, that has been ruled out. That is not playing a role here. I've taken multiple tests at this point. I have no other signs and symptoms of actual pregnancy here, and timeline wise, it doesn't quite match up here. So I got super, super sick, and it took me a few days to recover from that. I could probably even throw in several days to fully recover. And I'm better now, and I'm still not great. And I'm also not convinced it was food poisoning, and it very well might have been. And here's another lesson here. Was it food poisoning? Was it not? Was it the other thing that is highly probable that could be on the table is it is a detox reaction, a significant one. And one of the things I noticed that when I noticed that I was not sweating and I was getting these heat intolerance flashes that we'd go out, I'd start to get dizzy, I'd start to get lightheaded, my body would get hot and didn't know what to do. I'd start to potentially get a little bit nauseous. Yeah, my body just couldn't handle it. So I started getting back in the sauna. I started upping liver supporting activities. I reintroduced coffee enemas. And I did these things. I really checked my ego, and I started very slow. I started very low, very slow, and I did start to notice an improvement sometimes, and sometimes I feel worse. And headaches, the headaches things, excuse me, is something that has been happening over the past few days. I'd probably say the last 5 days since I've really started to very, very, very much increase a lot of the liver supporting stuff. When I first started, wasn't noticing any headaches. As I've ramped up, I have started to notice headaches on some days. For me, like last Friday was borderline headache migraine, which is not my norm at all. And the previous day had done a little bit longer of a sauna session. And so, like, was that playing a role? The weekend before I got sick, I had done a pretty significant sauna session followed by a coffee enema the following day. Plus, I was really bumping up some of my liver supporting supplements. And was it just a detox reaction? My initial thought was it was actually a detox reaction because I wasn't, not to be super gross here, but I think this is valuable. Usually, if it's a detox reaction, we're not going to throw up real food. We're going to throw up bile, we're going to throw up liquid, and we're not going to throw up real food. And that was not the case for me. I was actually throwing up real food. My initial round was not the case, and my initial thought was this is a detox reaction. I went too hard this weekend, and that is what I'm experiencing. However, it shifted, and so it's what was it? Was it not? And here's the thing: I'm probably never gonna know. I don't think I'm ever gonna have an answer to that. And this is a really common thing that comes up here is we want an answer for everything. Some people want a diagnosis. Some people want to know like specifically like why exactly am I experiencing this? Why exactly am I dizzy? Why exactly am I nauseous? Why exactly am I having this rash? Why exactly do I get headaches after I do this thing? Why do I, sometimes have food sensitivities and sometimes not? Why do I experience this symptom at some point in times in my life and not others? Why? And here's the thing. I'm pretty smart. I feel very confident in saying that. I have done a lot of studying of physiology, of labs about how the body works, mast cells, histamine, how toxins, how the gut, how the body is so interconnected that oftentimes I can come up with an answer of, hey, it could be this. This would make logical sense for me based on everything that I know about the body. And sometimes I don't have an answer. And sometimes I have a well-educated guess, and that's about where we land. And I know it can be frustrating. And I know, for me, when I initially got diagnosed with a handful of things way many years ago now, I really held on to those things. I was like, I have chronic EBV. This is going to be something that I'm going to hold on to for the rest of my life. I have Hashimoto's. I have hypothyroidism. I'm going to have a hard time losing weight. I'm going to have to be mindful of my thyroid. I'm going to be mindful of my autoimmune disease. I'm going to have this autoimmune disease. What if I develop more? Because once you get one, you can't develop many more. And we can get really locked into this. The other thing that I think about pretty regularly is one of the first practitioners I saw was a specialist in chiropractic neurology who also specialized in functional medicine. Still, hands down to this day, like one of the smartest individuals I've ever met in my entire life. Just his vast knowledge of the body, even still to this day. I look back, I think about some of our conversations that we had and some of the things that he explained to me, and just I'm still blown away with his level of knowledge. And he told me in one of our first meetings after doing a couple tests, neurological type tests, that trauma damages the brain. And essentially, that if you have a history of childhood trauma, you have brain damage. And that is something that really scared me, and also that I held on to for a really long time. That I have a significant trauma history, and therefore I have brain damage. My brain is never going to work, quote unquote, normally. And I'm always going to experience potentially some of these neurological type symptoms and or effects from dealing with trauma, which I don't believe is the case. I don't believe that anymore. There are things that can shape and change our brain. And I also believe that given the right conditions, our brains can change just and our brains can heal and our brains can shift and do pretty miraculous things because I've seen it, not only in myself, but I mean, hundreds and hundreds of case studies at this point of working with people. But I think we can get so locked into, I have this thing, or I have this symptom. This is going to be a part of my life. And we want all of those answers and we want the diagnosis and we hang on to that diagnosis and we become very connected with the diagnosis, become very connected with these things that we're experiencing. And that doesn't mean that's our reality for the rest of our lives. And I think it's very, very important to work through that, to process that, to understand that, to let that go. I mean, I've worked with a lot of clients with IBS, and even at the end of the day, after working with these clients for 6, 8, 12 plus months, they're still like, I have IBS and I just have to be mindful of what I eat. And it breaks my heart because I just don't believe that is the case, just because I've seen it too many times where IBS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and there's many, many others here that are so blanket diagnoses that doctors just don't know what's wrong with you, and you happen to fit into a category of symptoms that they've then labeled these symptoms as this quote unquote disease that you may have, and we can hold on to that. And our bodies know, I firmly believe that our bodies know that. And if we hold on to that, we can manifest the symptoms of it without even physically having some of these things in place. And I know I've talked in some previous episodes of a SIBO flare that I had, that I started a quote unquote SIBO flare, where I started experiencing very similar signs of SIBO, and I started taking supplements, and I didn't really do a whole lot. And then I came to recognize something I was holding on to energetically and emotionally. And once I was able to identify that and let that go, all the symptoms went away. And so the question is, did I really have SIBO? Or was my body presenting a specific type of symptoms to try and talk to me and be like, hey, Megan, you got something going on and you're not listening. Tune into this and see what this is. And as soon as I was able to recognize what it was and let it go, symptoms went away. And I have seen that dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times. That's a real thing for me. And this doesn't mean that it's in your head. It's just a physical manifestation of trauma, of stress, of something emotional, some sort of trauma that maybe you're processing. And so all of that is a big deal, and all of that is very, very, very real. And once again, a lot of times we just need to listen, to tune in. And once we can identify what we're holding on to, what's coming up for us, and we can start to let it go, these physical manifestations can also just go away. And maybe we don't even need supplements or lifestyle changes or nutritional changes. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we need all of it. And once again, that's a big piece of the work that we do within our practice, is we look at all of these pieces. the body doesn't work in isolation. The body works all together all the time. And so we have to look at all of these things all at once if we want to heal and stay healed long term. So that's really important. So, for me, just trying to let that go and especially as a practitioner, and I know any practitioners who listen to this will know 100% what this feels like. If you start going down rabbit holes, you're like, okay, let me think about this. And we can certainly, people can go through Google rabbit holes 100% going through a lot of this too, of okay, what is going on? What am I experiencing? Why am I experiencing all of this? And I go through, okay, liver, what is my liver doing? All right, let me tune into my liver. What other physical symptoms may I be experiencing that may be signs that my liver is overburdened? Maybe my liver is really struggling. Maybe do I need detox support? Do I need hormone support? Do I need adrenal support? Do I need thyroid support? Like, what does this really look like? And this is where testing can come into play. And I will say I have been holding off a little bit, just hoping some of this will go away, hoping all of it will go away, and waiting I really wanted to wait another 2 months to get some labs run. And at this point, for me, it became just do it now. I was going to run them in a couple of months anyways. Just do it now. Let me get an idea of what's really going on here and see how my body's asking for support. And it's not for me when I run labs, it's not about what's wrong with my body. It's how is my body asking for support right now? How do I need to support it? How do I need to support it nutritionally? Hydration. I've thought about, am I just dehydrated? Is that a thing? And I've really prioritized that to help and support. And I do think that has helped. No, I don't think that's all of it. And I do think that has helped. And increasing electrolyte intake, hydrate, just water intake overall. I've also, started adding trace minerals back in and just supporting my body that way, which once again has helped. And no, it has not fixed everything either. So, so that's a big piece of this. And once again, just not holding on and identifying too strongly with these symptoms and having them become part of our identity. Because here's the other thing that often happens, and this is really where I see, especially some of my longer term clients that I work with, and we've shifted out of a lot of the toxin load, gut health, hormone, like we're past a lot of that, and our bodies are in a really good spot where we're focusing on deeper trauma healing, nervous system regulation, that side of things. And we can continue to want to over-identify and hold on to some of these things because maybe they've been part of our identities for a really long time. Maybe we've gotten used to the attention of it. Maybe we've gotten used to the isolation of it. Maybe we've gotten used to different aspects of it. And it can be quite easy to have that become part of our identities. And I would invite you to really, really think about that. Maybe really sit with that and maybe see if that is you. Are you over-identifying with something, and is that potentially limiting some of your ability to heal? Maybe not. But I think it's a worthwhile question to ask for anyone dealing with chronic illness issues and or going through their healing journeys themselves right now. The other kind of last piece that I wanted to talk about with this is hormones. So I mentioned that it's been a few months now where I'm noticing this progesterone drop right after I ovulate. And so last month, 2 months ago, I said, okay, little annoyed, a little tired of this. So I'm going to support my body and I can tell what's happening. I'm going to supplement myself. And I know this isn't the best way to do this, but I don't feel like this is the best time to spend $300 on a hormone test because I'm getting ready to come out of this in the next couple months, out of the stress cycle. And so I'm not going to test. So I'm going to supplement with myself something that is safe, that I know is safe. And I also know the consequences of what this can look like. So for me, I supplemented with a supplement called pregnenolone, which for a lot of women who have pretty good estrogen levels, pretty good testosterone levels, but lowered progesterone levels, for some, this can be very supportive without going on actual HRT. And it's a natural way. Pregnenolone can convert straight to progesterone and can be very supportive. I've used it many, many times with clients only after we've done testing. Because one of the things that I really like in the Dutch test that we use, which is a urine test, which is, I will not This is a non-negotiable for me. I will not recommend any sort of hormone supplementation without running this test because for a lot of the reasons that I'm about to talk about here, but we can see pregnenolone pathways. And this gives us a good idea of, okay, if your progesterone is low, how is this likely to be converted? Because it may not just be converted to progesterone. And that is something that we want to take a deeper look at. And once again, I know the side effects, I know what can happen, and I was well aware and prepared for these things to happen. So typically, pregnenolone will convert to progesterone. Now, there's something called the pregnenolone steal, in which case you can almost bypass the conversion to progesterone and go straight to cortisol, which is exactly what happened to me the first night I took it. I took it in the evening. Typically, we'll take progesterone in the evening, and for many people, pregnenolone in the evening can be very supportive because it will be converted to that progesterone, which can help you sleep a little bit better. Well, that was not the case for me. Mine had this pregnenolone steal, got converted to cortisol. It took me several hours to fall asleep, which is absolutely not my norm. Did not sleep super well. So that is a real thing that can happen. And once again, this is what we test and don't guess with our actual clients. And once again, I was aware that this could happen. And I made sure that I started it on a day where the next day I had some time to sleep in case this happened. The other thing that happened is my mind went pretty dark from a mental and emotional standpoint. And that is not a usual place for me. That is not a common place for me anymore. And I did spend a lot of my life in that place. And once again, I know when we mess with hormones, you can also very much mess with your neurotransmitters. And this is a very, very real thing. And so once again, I was prepared. Excess anxiety, excess depression. Like I'm aware that these things can happen. And I went to a very dark place within about 30 minutes of me taking the supplement. And once again, I felt very comfortable doing this myself because I am able to separate. I felt myself going to the space and I go, ooh, okay, this is where my brain is going right now. This is where my thoughts are going. These are not mine. This is definitely just a hormonal thing messing with my neurotransmitters. I'm aware of this. This is not actually me. And I'm able to provide some separation of that, which doesn't mean it wasn't fun. And it's not like I have to succumb to that anymore or I stay in that place. And that's a really big deal. And that is a skill that takes time and energy and consistency to work through. But it is a very, very, very valuable skill to have, especially if you are experiencing any sort of anxiety and or depression. Very, 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 very valuable skill to have. So that can happen. So then I started messing around with timing of it. And, things got real funky. I got tired one day. I definitely felt an increase, so pregnenolone can go progesterone converted. We have the pregnenolone steal, which then converts to cortisol. We can also convert it to DHEA, which can then go to cortisol. It can also go to testosterone. And I did notice, I think there was some DHEA testosterone conversion thing going on. I could feel that within my body, excess testosterone, which is not a bad feeling, by the way, for most of us. Just felt a little bit more energized. I could felt stronger, libido increased, things like that. Pretty classic testosterone bumping up kind of symptoms here. And I took maybe out of the 12 or 13 days that I had in the rest of my cycle, I took maybe 5 or 7 capsules total of that pregnenolone last month. And it was quite the wild ride. And once again, I was fully prepared to take that ride. Yes, I did notice an overall improvement. There was quite a bit of figuring things out of, okay, should I take it today? I've taken it 2 days in a row. Okay, maybe I don't feel the best today, so I'm going to skip today and see how I feel. And then maybe tomorrow I'll take it. And so there was some playing around there, but I did notice an overall improvement, and there was also a lot of figuring things out. And this is once again, this is just why I like to test and not just guess, because the average person may not have the skill set that I have in being able to manage and work through a lot of these things. And I think that's a very valuable skill to acknowledge and to recognize of what is our capacity to ride some of these waves? And, I know I talk about it quite a bit in as you're going through a healing journey, you have to learn how to ride the waves. And this is like, especially when we start doing nervous system regulation work, learning how to ride those waves is a really, really, really big deal because things are never going to be perfect and stay perfect. You're going to have ups and downs. It's a natural part of life. And one of the best tools that we can have is being able to regulate our nervous system so don't get stuck in any one place, and we learn how to ride those waves, and we have tools and resources for all parts of the waves. And this is an extremely, extremely important piece of this. So yeah, I just wanted to share just a little update here, and then also share just some of these just reminders that I've been noticing over the last really like month or so as things haven't been great, and just trying to ride the waves as best as I can, even when symptoms are not comfortable for me. For me right now, like dizzy, nausea, just like are not comfortable things for me. This feeling like I'm going to pass out sometimes, especially when I do get overheated, which is sometimes there, sometimes not there. Yeah, it's very, very challenging, and I am riding those waves. And I'm taking steps to work through all of this, and I'm still able to show up for my clients, and my work has changed. And once again, I have a lot. I am so grateful that I have the business that I do, the team that I do, so that I can ride these waves a little bit easier without so much pressure from a work standpoint. So I hope this was valuable for you, and thank you for your continued patience and everything as I continue to ride my own ways, and also support people as they ride their own ways. And I just think there's some really good lessons that have been brought up again for me that I really wanted to share with you that I think is going to be really valuable. And I will continue to keep you guys updated as I get more information, as I feel differently and things shift and change for me. So, yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. And I thank you for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, follow. Any reviews like really, really, really mean the world to me and to us. So we really appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.